with you. I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you. The ovation was tremendous. I just love that story. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, we all have this happen to us at some point, right? Okay, but when you're in the middle of this sad ballad, you know, these wonderful, sad notes dripping from the bell of your trumpet. Mercy. Can you imagine that? Now, even though I wasn't actually there in the room at the Village Vanguard, I could imagine myself right there in that room with Wynton Marsalis, listening and hanging on to every single note that dripped out of the bell of his trumpet. Talk about making music. Talk about creativity. Talk about leadership. Now, that's the truth about success. You don't get there without a lot of hours, thousands of hours of practice every single day, right? And the truth about success is that it takes that kind of mastery to become and to sustain that kind and level of success. Can I hear an amen? So, I just, again, love that story, love Marsalis, love jazz, love music. Now, I also want to shine the light today on another creative genius, and her name is J.K. Rowling. Now, when I said her name earlier, I wanted you to just kind of think, like, where have I heard that name before? Well, most of us have heard that name. If you haven't, you're probably not spending a whole lot of time on planet Earth. J.K. Rowling is the author of the wildly popular Harry Potter series. I love this quote by J.K. Rowling. She says, "We do not need magic to transform our world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already." We do not need magic to transform our world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. Now that's the truth. These words are from a person who has become incredibly successful by conjuring up stories about magic, right? So let's learn a little bit more about J.K. Rowling. Her birth name is Joanne Rowling. And Joanne was born on the 31st of July in 1965 at a hospital in the UK, United Kingdom, called Yate General, just outside of Bristol. Her father was an engineer for the Rolls-Royce factory, and her mother was a science technician in chemistry at a school near their home. Now think about that, okay? And think about what she writes about. There are no accidents, right? Joanne, or Jo for short, lived a life surrounded by books. She says, "I lived for books." I know I can certainly relate to that. When I was a kid, I loved books so much I hung out at the library in our neighborhood most days after school. I could have slept in that library, not just once in a while, but day after day. That's how much I loved books. J.K. Rowling says, "I was your basic common or garden bookworm, right? Complete with freckles and national health spectacles." And she dreamed of becoming a writer from the time she was a very young girl. When she was 6 years old, Jo wrote her first book. The book was a story about a rabbit. And what did she call her book? Well, she called it what any self-respecting 6-year-old would. It was a book about a rabbit. And so she called her book Rabbit. Now, that's a very nice title, don't you think? When she was 11 years old, Jo wrote her first novel, a book about 7 cursed diamonds and the people who owned the Cursed Diamonds. When she was 18 years old, she attended Exeter University. There she had many opportunities to cultivate her love of books. She especially enjoyed reading the classics. Now, who knew that someday her knowledge of the classics would serve her very, very well as she created and crafted the spells in the Harry Potter series. In her 20s, she obtained her degree from Exeter, and afterwards, Jo moved to London and took on a number of diverse jobs. One of the many places she worked was at Amnesty International. There, she took on a job as a researcher. Rowling says, "There in my little office I read hastily scribbled letters smuggled out of totalitarian regimes by men and women who were risking imprisonment to inform the outside world of what was happening to them. My small participation in that process was one of the most humbling and inspiring experiences of my life." So, how did Jo come to create Harry Potter? Great question. She came to create the Harry Potter series on a train. That's right, on a train. In fact, she was on a train that had been delayed for some reason, a train due to travel from Manchester, England, to London's King's Cross station. And what began as a seed of an idea grew to become an entire series. In fact, during the next few years, 5 to be exact, Jo immersed herself in mapping out all the books in the Harry Potter series. Now, like many of us who are writers, Jo wrote her notes by hand. Over the years, she would capture many, many, many notes, handwriting them on bits and scraps of paper. Along the way, she left London for Portugal. She relocated so she could teach English as a foreign language. While she was living in Portugal, she married and had a baby girl. However, soon afterwards, her marriage ended. So, Joanne left northern Portugal and returned to her home in the UK. This time, she decided to locate herself in Edinburgh, one of my favorite cities on the planet. So many wonderful memories I have from being there. So now she's living in Scotland, in the beautiful capital city of Edinburgh, and at this point, Jo had her daughter in tow, as well as the first few chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. To support herself and her baby girl, Jo studied and trained to become a teacher and began teaching in the Edinburgh schools. And like all good writers, she kept her great novel, her magnum opus, right at her fingertips, in her top drawer, so to speak, and she wrote whatever she could when she had the free time. Once Jo had finished her manuscript, she sent a portion of it to a number of literary agents. Now, typically, a writer sends out several chapters at a time. One of the literary agents wrote her back, wanting to see the whole manuscript. Jo says, "It was the best letter I ever received in my life." That book that she sent out to literary agents was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. That book was first published in the UK in 1997. And about a year later, the very same book was published with a slightly different title in the U.S. In the U.S., her book was called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Both books were published under the name J.K. Rowling. So, we know what the J stands for, Jo or Joanne, right? But what does the K stand for? Well, it stands for Kathleen, and Kathleen is the name of her father's mother. So why was her grandmother's K added to her name? Another great question. Well, her publisher requested it because the publisher suggested that a book targeted for an audience of young boys might not have the same appeal if the author's name was obviously female. Well, we now know that J.K. Rowling's first Harry Potter book, along with the many titles that followed, helped her achieve phenomenal success. And not only with the books that she's written, I mean, there have been film adaptations, merchandising, including a number of theme parks and amusement parks all around the world. All totaled, all of these things, these records of her writing, helped her achieve record-breaking success. So, what might Rowling share regarding the truth about success? Well, I've read a lot of what she says about creativity and imagination, and I believe that she'd say that both are key. Indeed, Rowling has this to say about imagination. Imagination is not only the uniquely human capacity to envision that which is not, and therefore the font of all invention and innovation. In its arguably most transformative and revelatory capacity, it is the power that enables us to empathize with humans whose experiences we have never shared. Right? So what is she saying here? Imagination helps us to envision, to dream about what is not actually there yet, right? So it's like the foundation of invention and innovation. But she said its most powerful impact is that it helps us to walk in another person's shoes. It enables us to empathize with human beings whose experiences we have never shared. That's the power of storytelling. Whether that's stories in a book, a film, a video, an amusement park, a musical composition, a ballad played by a trumpeter in a world-famous jazz club, all of those are forms of storytelling. Now, from my understanding of Rowling's life and work, I believe she would also say that the truth about success includes failure. Failure? Yeah, that's right. Failure. Now, why is failure so important? J.K. Rowling says this: we speak about success all the time. It is the ability to resist failure or use failure that often leads to greater success. I've met people who don't want to try for fear of failing. Furthermore, she says, it is impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default, right? And even if we live cautiously, this is Gloria speaking now, even if we live cautiously, at some point in our lives we've all failed. Most of us probably don't remember learning how to walk, but we failed over and over and over and over again until one day we grabbed the leg of a chair or the leg of a table or somebody's hand and we took that first step. Right? And then we took another step. And then maybe we let go of the table leg or the leg of that chair or somebody's hand and boop, we fall down. Okay? And by falling down, we fail to walk. And we get up again, and we take a step, and another step, and another step. Now, another word of wisdom from J.K. Rowling about failure is this. She says, I'm not going to tell you that failure is fun. But the knowledge that you have emerged wiser and stronger from setbacks means that you are ever after, secure in your ability to survive.